Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Buffalo Plus YouTube channel. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. We appreciate all the people subscribing. We got a special guest with us. He is from News 5 in Cleveland. He is the Browns Countdown host, and he used to cover the Buffalo Bills for us in Rochester, New York. Jon Doss, welcome to Buffalo Plus.
It was a hell of a lot less fun when I covered the Bills than it seems to be now. Although it's not a lot of fun covering the Browns either. They suck too.
Yeah, they've had a rough little stretch here. All right, we're going to go through a little bit about what we're going to see on Sunday as these teams get together. And the matchup is a strange one, but let's start with the biggest thing. This wasn't that long ago in Orchard Park when the Bills played the Colts back in the 2017 season, when we had probably the worst snow game in the history of the Bills, and the Bills ended up surviving and winning that game. And the reason I bring it up is because everybody is seeing the forecast for Sunday, and there's Shady McCoy heading to the end zone when these two teams meet. So it may happen. It might impact the game. It could be all cleared out of the field by then. What do you think if we have another Bills-Browns snow game? Because we had one of those in Cleveland in 2007.
Well, let's see. What are they calling for total? 30 inches in Buffalo?
Yeah.
Yeah. It might take 60 or 70 for the Browns to have a shot in this game.
It's that bad, isn't it?
This is the least motivated team I've ever covered. In 10 years of covering professional football teams in some degree, this is the least motivated team I've ever seen. As soon as adversity hits and the going gets tough, these guys check out. And you would think poor weather would favor the Browns on Sunday, right? Because the Browns, although Jacoby Brissett has been much better than anybody anticipated, the Browns have one of the best running games in football. We didn't see it last weekend in Miami or this weekend in Miami. But they have the 1-2 punch of Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. They have one of the best offensive lines in football, especially when healthy. You would think that a snow game would benefit the Browns. I just think this team is so checked out, it might not matter.
So is it Stefanski? Is it the Deshaun Watson thing hanging over everybody?
Honestly, I think that's what it is. So as soon as the Watson appeal came down and it was 12 games, I think a lot of guys checked out. And you know this, Mike. Football players are human beings too, and they're very emotional human beings. That's their job, is they play an emotional game. And when you are told right off the bat you're not winning the Super Bowl, right? Some people thought maybe we could get to the postseason, maybe we can win a couple of games with Jacoby Brissett, but nobody thought they were going to win the Super Bowl and probably not be a divisional contender or a postseason contender. And when you're told that back in July or August, as soon as adversity hits, why are you putting your body on the line? They went out and they beat Carolina, a bad Carolina team, on a 55-yard field goal at the end of the game. They blew an epic loss to the Jets in week 2. And as soon as that happened, that was my worry, that this team could crumble, because there's very little leadership on this team, and that's what we've seen so far. I don't know if the Browns are winning another game this year.
All right, we'll get back to Watson in a minute, because we're not going to see Watson this week. It's still Jacoby Brissett. Are there moments that there's a reason to be encouraged? Maybe not for this season because they're so far behind. Do you see any of that? And I know it's tough to go by, but, you know, Amari Cooper has had some moments on this team offensively. Brissett's trying his best. When Nick Chubb gets going, as you mentioned, they can be pretty good. Or do you see any of that? Because at a point now, Watson is going to be joining this team, but he's going to need to join something.
I should have shaved as I'm looking at myself here. I really look terrible here. Dan would be proud of the hoodie that's on here. Yeah, you know, they have shown flashes. You watched the Monday night game 2 weeks ago when they crushed the Bengals. This is the most talented 3-6 team maybe ever. And that's hyperbole, obviously, because I don't know all the 3-6 teams that's ever played. But there is so much talent on this Browns team. It really is just simply about motivation. Yeah, are we happy we have another 2 years of Nick Chubb under contract? Yes. Kareem Hunt's likely not on this team next year. They've shown flashes like Donovan Peoples-Jones of becoming a legitimate number 2 wide receiver in the NFL. The thing is as much as you like Myles Garrett on the defensive side of the ball, all these young cornerbacks that we thought were going to be one of the best secondaries in football, led by Denzel Ward and Greg Newsome, have taken a massive step back. So all of the optimism we had on so many of these position groups coming into the year, now we got question marks with these guys. Deshaun Watson may be good. He may not be. He hasn't played in 2 years. But I think we have far more question marks now than we did 9 weeks ago.
Yeah. When they talk about the best teams, it usually goes, ownership, general manager, coaching, and quarterback. And I feel for the fans of Cleveland because they've waited, like Bills fans, for this period of time. They had some things going. And, I don't know if Baker was going to be the guy, but at least Baker, up to that point, at least from the outside, he played hurt. He tried to come back. Maybe he wasn't the guy. But it almost seems like if you're going to replace him, replace him. But the Deshaun Watson thing was so impactful for the fan base, too, who bleed for the Browns, right? And you've made it hard for fans to root for this franchise, right?
It's the only other fan base that is similar to the Buffalo Bills fan base is the Browns. I think you agree with me. We've talked about this. These two cities and these two fan bases are really linked, and they're very similar. And this city was not as high, or had not been as high as 2020 when they went to the postseason, when they beat the Steelers in that playoff game, as when they did then. I mean, honestly, a single playoff win for the Browns almost rivaled winning the NBA championship in 2016 with LeBron. That's how much people care about the Browns in this city. And they had invested so much optimism in this team. We thought they were going to win Super Bowls when they got Odell Beckham Jr. after Baker Mayfield looked like the second coming as a rookie. Then they go to the postseason. Everything looks great. And boy, how quickly did that spiral downward. And there are a lot of fans that are over this team, that are over this franchise, which I never thought I would see in this city. Now, do I think they'll come back if they start putting a winner on the field? Absolutely. But people in this city are tired, man. They're tired of this team and this franchise and the underperforming now for decades.
We've seen a lot of players in the NFL just try to push their way out and say, send me somewhere else. It never used to happen that way. It's sort of a NBA vibe that has happened with certain players. You mentioned a guy like Myles Garrett. Do you ever sense any of that? Any of these guys saying, I'm not waiting around for this?
It's less Myles Garrett. I don't sense that from Garrett. But, Kareem Hunt asked for a trade in training camp. And Kareem Hunt's from Cleveland. He's a Cleveland kid, grew up going to Browns games. He wants to be here. But for him, the writing was on the wall. He could be a starting running back in most other places in the NFL, but he's sitting behind Kareem Hunt. That holdout, if you will, lasted a day and a half. So they haven't really dealt with a lot of that because the really good players on this team have already been paid. They've invested a lot of money in Denzel Ward and in Myles Garrett and in Nick Chubb. And so we don't see that. But I think that it's funny. It's good and bad with that. There's no fire on this team. The Browns' best players, Ward, Garrett, Chubb, are often the most quiet guys on the team. There is no fire. And I think you can have that when you have a potentially fiery head coach, but the Browns don't have that either. Kevin Stefanski may be brilliant. He's an Ivy Leaguer. That's great. Love to have dinner with the guy, but there's none of that energy. And I point to Sean McDermott. And when you talk about culture, and I think that's kind of what you're getting to, is McDermott and that front office seem to have changed the culture in Buffalo. And we thought that was going to be the case with Barry and Stefanski in Cleveland. And they have shown us that it's not the case, that this is still a cancerous culture, that as soon as losing hits, it's a spiral.
Yeah. The Watson thing, I've never seen anything like it because it's not like, I think back to Michael Vick when he joined the Eagles and then eventually played. And what he did was heinous and people were very upset and had a right to be. But Michael Vick went to federal prison.
Yeah.
Michael Vick lost his career. Michael Vick came back as a third stringer, paid back people, did all those things, arrived, hung out with the team with Andy Reid for a while, and then eventually got his chance to play. But he had shown that remorse. There's still people that can't stand Michael Vick. I get it. That's always going to be the case. But he really did change the narrative. The deal with Watson that is so both alarming and fascinating to me is that it's just still hanging out there, and he has this massive contract. It's not like he's around. Could he play on the team? And then in a year, something else can happen. Like, they are tied to this guy forever. What's it been like with him coming back around the team?
Well, for one, thank you for the Philadelphia analogy, which, I know you so rarely do. I was interning in D.C. when Michael Vick had just recently gotten out of prison, and he was volunteering. He was doing stuff, I think, with PETA or the ASPCA or something. So you're right. He showed contrition, right? He knew that he had screwed up. And, whether these guys really believe it or not, he did all of the right things that we haven't seen Deshaun Watson do. This team won one game in 2 seasons. And that did not alienate its fan base. Signing Deshaun Watson alienated a large portion of this fan base. Again, if he's great, if he wins, we know the story. We know people are going to come back. I will say that I think giving him that money also sent a message to the team, to the locker room. Denzel Ward got paid. I know he's gone to a couple of Pro Bowls, but there are a lot of people that think Denzel Ward is a very average defensive back, if not slightly above average defensive back, and they paid him more money than any cornerback in NFL history at the time. So I think that there's been a message sent to this locker room too, that even being average is good enough. Or in Deshaun Watson's case, you may be a jerk. You may be a serial sexual assault, alleged sexual assaulter, right? And you're still going to get paid.
Yeah.
So what does this team value? What does this franchise value?
That's a great point. I always tell the guys here, guys in the locker room, absolutely notice who gets paid. I don't mean just notice, they all know it, but it means something. And it means something when it's the internal guy. Whether he's a popular guy or not, they get it when guys get paid. And it's rare when guys don't. And the Bills are going through this to some extent with a guy like Jordan Poyer. But Jordan Poyer's more towards the end, closer to the end of his career, and he has given everything. But they notice those things, and those things can be impactful. When you go out and sign a Von Miller, they all know who Von Miller is. He's won Super Bowls. He comes in, embraces the culture, and does that. You pay Josh Allen, they get it. You pay Stephon Diggs, they get it. And then they think, if I do my job, I may not get that, but I'm going to get paid. And I think that really is a big part of culture.
That's such a perfect analogy with Von Miller, because look at being in the Bills locker room and signing Von Miller and the amount of cash you got to give him, whatever, to being in the Browns locker room and signing Deshaun Watson. And those are two very different messages. Those are two very different. Lost you. Yeah. I got so excited. Two very different teammates. And that's, the Browns have not sent very many messages, good messages to the fan base or to the locker room.
Yeah, and so for Stefanski, what happens? I know Bills fans, and we'll talk a little more specifically about the game in a second, but what happens? Well, what happens when he's ready? I mean, when he's allowed to be back? Does he just walk out on the field and play?
Yeah, immediately. Yeah.
So what's he doing now?
So actually, good timing, and I don't know if this gets posted up immediately or what, but he will practice Wednesday. Wednesday is the first day that he is allowed to practice with the team. He has been in the facility for 3 weeks, and he's been able to be in meetings and get treatment and stuff. But Wednesday is the first day he can practice with the team. So he will get a 3-week run up to that Texans game in week 13, and he will start immediately.
Yeah. And what do you sense, and maybe it's hard to so far, like I know the way NFL players are, they can look past some things. I don't know what he's like individually dealing with other players.
Yeah.
But do you sense anything with the players around him, or they know he can play, and as a player, they're ready for him to be on the field?
How can I say this? For better or worse, I don't really think most care.
Yeah.
It's like having coworkers, right? In any line of work, if your coworker's a good coworker, you can look past some things. Now, what we're talking about looking past is potentially very egregious. I think that if he comes in and he's really, really good, I don't think anybody's going to care, unfortunately. And players in the locker room do like him. I mean, as soon as the guy touched down, he took the entire offense, all the skill position players to the Bahamas. And Would he have done that if he wasn't, coming off of this situation off the field? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. But he made a lot of friends early, and I think there are a lot of players in the locker room looking forward to him playing.
Yeah. Well, the Bills won't see him on Sunday, and the Bills are, coming off some strange ones. The one against the Jets, we're talking to Jordan Phillips after the game, and he basically said, you know what? In this league, if you don't step up, if you're not ready, you basically get it handed to you physically, and they did. The difference was in this Vikings game last week, I mean, they were in control of that game and then fell apart, and they've made those mistakes. From the outside, looking in at the Bills and knowing the kind of team your team that you cover is going to face, do you sense there's an issue? Do you sense from the outside that it's a blip that a lot of teams go through?
Do I sense it's an issue with who? The Bills?
Yeah.
Yeah, much like if you don't bring it, you can get it handed to you. You have to close out games.
Yeah.
You talk about the Jets. The Jets stole one from the Bills. They stole one from the Browns, too. The Browns were up by 2 scores with 138 left and lost the game. They were up by 14 with 138 left and lost to the Jets. You have to be able to close out games. And I think Buffalo is the most terrifying team in the NFL. But if Josh Allen gives you windows in the fourth quarter that allows you to come back in, Ben Roethlisberger was famous for that for years, right? Really good team, really good offense. He could move the ball down the field. He could score at will. But there were moments in each game that he gave you an opportunity. And Josh Allen, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't really do that a lot last year.
No.
But this year, it seems like he's a little bit of the Josh Allen of 2019, certainly in the fourth quarter. But honestly, Mike, I don't think any of that matters Sunday. I don't, because I think that the Bills are going to have a healthy enough lead in the fourth quarter. Closing out the game should not be an issue.
All right, you mentioned the secondary for the Browns. Yeah. How's the pass rush been? Do they get a pass rush? And is that, if they don't, is that contributing to the issues you're having in the secondary?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, trying to cover, as you know, trying to cover Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle for 5 seconds is you're dead. They have in my opinion, the second best pass rusher in football, Myles Garrett. And I think Watt in Pittsburgh has earned the right to be number 1. And a guy opposite him, Jadeveon Clowney, when they were working really well together last year, they had an incredible pass rush. Myles Garrett set the single season sack record for this franchise, and Jadeveon Clowney, I think, had 9.5 last year. Clowney made it very public that he signed with the Browns. He re-signed with the Browns for this 1-year deal because of the optimism with Watson. And when Watson was told he wasn't going to play 12 games, I think more than anybody else, Jadeveon Clowney checked out. He has missed a handful of games. I think at this point in his career, it's about self-preservation if they are not going to make a run to the postseason and potentially a championship. And Jadeveon Clowney has been virtually a factor for this team. Their interior defensive line is so bad. Every week, it's like they're trying to get somebody else's practice squad player. They just did it again yesterday. Practice squad player from Miami that nobody's ever heard of to try to come in and make an impact on this team. Outside of Garrett, there is very little pass rush. And if Garrett is unmotivated like he was in Miami last weekend, there's no pass rush.
Wow. And offensively, look, the Bills have struggled stopping the run. It has been an issue. And we all know the way this league is, where it's a copycat league. Von Miller talked about it, and he's like, teams are going to see it. And then they got into the game with the Jets, and he said they saw what happened in Green Bay. They ran some of the same plays. And then last week, they were doing a decent job, and then, boom, Cook's gone for 80 yards and a touchdown. So if you're the Browns, if you're our old buddy Alex Van Pelt, by the way, does he call the plays or does Stefanski call the plays? Stefanski.
He stands there with a headset and I assume a clipboard and yes, coach. Sounds good, coach.
So Stefanski's calling the plays.
Calls the plays.
If he's calling the plays, are you let's just say weather is not a factor in the game.
Okay.
Doesn't Chubb get the ball 25 plus times in this game?
You sound like all of us.
I mean, that's what I would do.
You asked the same question we all asked. I think that, and this is an issue with some coaches, and you know this. Kevin Stefanski is very smart. He's an Ivy Leaguer. He went to Penn. He's got a great football mind. His opening script is as good as anybody in the NFL, that first drive or two, right? Throughout the course of a game, Kevin Stefanski, I think, outsmarts himself sometimes. And you know that this is an issue with some coaches where they say, well, they think we're going to run, so we're going to pass. But you know what? Sometimes they think you're going to run because you're just that much better at running than you are passing. So run the ball. Figure out a way that you can run the ball and be successful running the ball when the other team knows you're going to run the ball. If they stack 8 in the box, figure out a way to make it work. You get the best two-headed monster in the NFL. We have been clamoring all year, both in the media and in the fan base. Nick Chubb needs 25 touches. Kareem Hunt needs 15 touches. Now, for Hunt, that likely means, 8 or 9 carries and 5 or 6 targets. They don't lean on these guys nearly enough. And even still, Nick Chubb is second in the NFL in rushing. So, yeah, that's the only way I think they have a shot to beat a team like Buffalo is to run the football, because not only is that their best offensive weapon, it also keeps, as we know, Josh Allen off the field. That's how they had success against the Bengals.
Yeah. Well, if I was going up against the Bills right now, it's what I would be doing until they stopped it. They played that Jets game. They had them pinned at the 4-yard line, and they ran the ball 8 straight times and moved it down the field. And, it's funny when you think of an NBA game, right? When Curry's making shots, you just keep feeding Curry and let him shoot until they stop it. If Embiid's in the post, you can't stop him. Keep doing it until they stop him.
Yeah.
You're right. Sometimes these teams, they try to outsmart. And, the Jets in that game ran it 8 straight times and the Bills didn't stop it.
And the perfect case was what we saw, late Sunday in the Packers game, when Aaron Rodgers says, we've been running the ball down their throat, and LaFleur calls that pass on 4th and 3 or whatever, and Rodgers is livid with him on the sideline. Sometimes you overthink it. If you say, well, they think we're going to run it. Well, there's probably a good reason they think you're going to run it.
All right. So you're obviously down on the Browns, but at the moment,
now, what gave you that idea?
Well, at the moment, Bills fans are anxious. And I go back to last year. They had a stretch where they lost 4 out of 6 games. They ended up losing a really tough one in Tampa against Brady. They came back to tie. They lost in overtime. Allen he had some really good moments, but a few. And then they just woke up. And they woke up, and they were really good down the stretch, and he was phenomenal in the playoffs, outside of the crazy game with the Patriots when nobody could throw the ball. They're looking for a get-well game. They're looking for get Allen going again. And you're thinking,
guess what?
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this, though. The at least the late game regression from Josh Allen, I saw that Dan had posted something on social media. How much of this is Dable not being there and a new offensive coordinator? Are we not giving Dable enough credit for what he did with Josh Allen? Because everybody in this town says, well, we should have drafted Josh Allen instead of Baker Mayfield. And there are many of us that say, I don't know that Josh Allen is this Josh Allen if he had to play with Hugh Jackson for a season.
Yeah, I agree. Look, Josh is immensely talented, hard worker, conscientious. He's got all that going for him. But what Dable did was instill the right level of confidence in the guy, found what he did well. He improved in a lot of things. He's a hard worker. He does all those things. And I had a lot of fans say to me, it's more Allen than Dable. Look, Allen will figure it out because he is smart and does those things well, but he's missing that part where the guy gets you back on track. And, Ken Dorsey doesn't have the experience as the play caller. They don't have that time together. And I think it's different. And I think when you even look at what Dable's doing with Daniel Jones, he's keeping him from killing the offense. He's making some plays, but he's also instilling a level of confidence in the guy that is immense with an NFL quarterback. And right now, Josh never seems to lose his confidence. But right now, I think there's moments where he is, I'm not going to say on the edge, but we saw him, immense frustration. He's made mistakes in big moments now in the past few games, and he just looks different. So I do believe there's something. It's not necessarily an indictment on Dorsey. He doesn't have that time with him yet. He's a bright guy, and I think he could be a good play caller. But quarterbacks need that. They really do. They got to have that trust. And I, at the moment, don't think it's there. But with Allen, when it comes back, there was some questions, like I said, and then he played 2 playoff games where I don't know if you could play the position better than he did in those games. And he deserved to go to the Super Bowl last year, and his team let him down. So it'll be interesting to see how he is because he needs to snap out of it.
If you're looking for a get-right game, and I'm joking around. Yes. Am I a believer in the Browns? No, absolutely not. This team has quit, Mike. There have been a number of gut check opportunities for this team, and they have failed every single time. They stunned the world beating the Bengals the way they did. Then they went into a bye, had 12 weeks to prepare for Miami, and looked like a JV team on the field against the Dolphins. They knew they needed to beat Miami and then either beat the Bills or Bucks to set themselves up with a chance at a late run with Deshaun Watson. And they were blown out the way they were in Miami. I think this team is completely shutting down. I would be shocked if this isn't a 2-touchdown win for the Bills.
Well, fans need to feel a little bit better coming into
Uncle
this game.
Dan, tell Uncle Dan to mark it down.
Best bet.
9 points, I think it is.
Yeah, it's a cover.
Oh my, to cover and then some. They might cover times 2.
Yeah. Well, it is they've had this before. This was the game I was covering in Cleveland in 2007. Probably.
Did anybody throw snowballs at Santa Claus?
No. It only happened in Philly 1,000 years ago. Look at this. Jamal Lewis. They shut out the Bills 8-0 in that game. And Trent Edwards was the quarterback. I think that's Roscoe Parrish he was trying to throw to. And I will just tell you a quick story with that. I was doing part of the Bills radio network, and they're covering it. So I was traveling with the team, and they fly everywhere, and we flew to Cleveland. And it was so much snow that night that we had to stay over in Cleveland, which, teams never stay over the night of the game. And then as we went to the airport in Cleveland, the plane, as they were taxiing it out, got stuck in the snow. So they said, stay on the bus. We're going back to Buffalo, which it's not that far of a trip, but that's what ended up happening. So these franchises have history in weather and the snow. That was an 8-0 Browns win. If it's that way this week, Bills fans are hoping for something different.
I don't think the Bills are getting shut out this week. I don't think so. I think Josh Allen's getting back to form Sunday.
We will see. All right. There's still people here that follow you from your time there. Let them know where people can follow you so they can get all this optimism about the Cleveland Browns coming into Sunday.
Well, I mean, Twitter's on the verge of crumbling anyway, but you can find me on Twitter. And that's about it. I mean, you guys have done such a good job digitally and on social media, and I hate it all. I hate social media. This social media has turned me into this pessimistic person covering this. Well, social media and the Browns themselves have turned me into this. But yeah, I still very much pay attention to the Bills and everything that's going on in Rochester. And even yesterday, watching the Warrior game, and Anthony Lamb is killing it for the Warriors, a Greece Athena star. And, I got a lot of love for Rochester and Western New York. And I tell people all the time, and I'm glad to see that the Bills have turned that corner. Hopefully they can win that Super Bowl this year. I still think they're the favorites, even though they've hit a couple of roadblocks. But they should win by a bunch Sunday.
All right. Well, we will see what happens on Sunday. We appreciate your insight. This is really enlightening to people who just, most of the time you're sort of watching from the outside and then you're trying to get an idea of what a team is doing. So we will all find out on Sunday. All right. That's going to do it for us today. Again, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. We are closing in on 20,000 subscribers. We appreciate every one of you. And John is a subscriber to Buffalo Plus. I've been a subscriber since
day one.
Look at that. So we appreciate him too. Make sure you check us out. And we always have coverage here on Buffalo Plus. For our entire team, Jenna Cottrell, Dan Fates, and myself, we thank Jon Doss, and we'll see you next time on Buffalo Plus.